The change in Gavin Reed's pocket jingled as he counted out the nickels and dimes on the convenience store counter, the fluorescent lights highlighting the dark circles under his eyes. The cashier's impatient stare burned into him as he carefully arranged $3.75, all he could afford for the small bouquet of daisies wrapped in cellophane. They weren't fancy, but they were his daughter Mia's favorite, and today was her 8th birthday. "Sorry about this," Gavin muttered, pushing the pile of coins toward the cashier, who swept them into his palm with practiced efficiency. "No problem, man." The cashier's voice softened as he glanced at the modest flowers. "Special occasion." Gavin nodded, tucking the bouquet carefully under his arm. "My daughter's birthday." He didn't mention that the daisies would be his only gift to her this year, or that he'd skipped lunch for 3 days to save the money. Outside, early autumn wind tousled Gavin's dark hair as he walked to his rusted Honda Civic. At 32, he looked older. The toll of raising a child alone while working 2 jobs had etched permanent lines around his eyes and mouth. But when he thought of Mia's smile, none of that mattered. The car protested with a wheezing cough before the engine caught, and Gavin headed toward his mother's house, where Mia stayed while he worked the evening shift at the warehouse. His day job as a mechanic barely covered rent for their small 2-bedroom apartment, and the extra hours stacking boxes helped with groceries and Mia's school supplies. As he pulled into his mother's driveway, Gavin checked his reflection in the rearview mirror and tried to smooth the wrinkles from his worn flannel shirt. He hid the flowers behind his back as he knocked on the door. Mia's excited squeal when she opened it made everything worth it. "Daddy." She launched herself into his arms, nearly knocking him off balance. "Happy birthday, princess." He spun her around once, her dark braids flying, before setting her down and presenting the daisies with a flourish. "For the birthday girl." Mia's eyes widened as she accepted the flowers, burying her small nose in the petals. "They're perfect, just like the ones in the garden at the park." Gavin's mother, Eleanor, appeared in the doorway, smiling warmly. "Come in, Gavin. I've made a small cake." The living room was decorated with paper streamers and balloons, his mother's attempt to make the day special, despite their limited means. A small stack of modestly wrapped presents sat on the coffee table, and a chocolate cake with 8 candles waited on the dining table. After cake and presents, mostly clothes and a few books from his mother, Gavin sat on the couch with Mia nestled against his side, telling him about her day at school. "Miss Jensen said I was the best reader in the whole class," she said proudly, "and I got to feed the class hamster." "That's amazing, sweetheart," Gavin said, stroking her hair. "You're the smartest kid I know. When are we going to the flower garden, Daddy? You promised we could go on my birthday." Gavin checked his watch and winced. He had to be at the warehouse in an hour. "I can't today, Mia. I have to work. But this weekend, I promise we'll spend the whole day there. You can bring your daisies and we'll see if we can find their cousins." Disappointment clouded Mia's face momentarily before she nodded, brave as always. "Okay. Can I put my flowers in water now?" As Mia carefully arranged her daisies in a mason jar with his mother's help, Gavin felt the familiar pang of guilt. He was doing his best, but his best never seemed enough. He'd been raising Mia alone since her mother abandoned them when Mia was just 3, deciding family life wasn't for her after all. The divorce had left him emotionally drained and financially strapped, but Mia had become his entire world, the reason he got up each morning. "I'll pick you up from school tomorrow," he promised as he kissed her goodbye. "We'll make macaroni and cheese for dinner, the kind with the shapes you like, with hot dogs cut up in it," Mia asked hopefully. "Absolutely, with hot dogs," he confirmed, tapping her nose gently. The warehouse was cold and cavernous, and Gavin's back ached as he hoisted boxes onto pallets. His supervisor, Frank, was in a foul mood, barking orders and criticizing the pace of work. When Gavin's phone vibrated in his pocket, he checked it quickly during a brief break. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" he asked quietly, stepping behind a tall stack of crates. "Everything's fine," Alina assured him. "Mia just wanted to thank you again for the flowers. She's put them by her bed and says they're the best present ever." Warmth spread through Gavin's chest. "Tell her I love her. She knows, son. You're doing a good job." After ending the call, Gavin returned to his station with renewed energy. Frank narrowed his eyes but said nothing as Gavin worked faster, determined to finish his shift on time. It was nearly midnight when he finally collapsed into bed, muscles screaming from the physical labor. But despite his exhaustion, sleep eluded him as he worried about the stack of bills on his kitchen counter and Mia's upcoming school field trip that required a fee he wasn't sure he could manage. Morning came too quickly, and after dropping Mia at school with a hug and a promise to pick her up later, Gavin headed to Parkside Auto, where he'd worked as a mechanic for the past 10 years. The owner, Joe, was a fair man who had been flexible with Gavin's schedule after the divorce, allowing him to work hours that accommodated Mia's school day. "Got a special one for you," Joe said as Gavin pulled on his coveralls. "Some fancy European sports car." Lady brought it in saying it was making a strange noise. Probably something simple, but you know these rich folks think every little sound means disaster. Gavin nodded, rolling up his sleeves. "I'll take a look." The car was indeed impressive, a sleek, midnight blue Aston Martin that likely cost more than Gavin would earn in a decade. He whistled low as he popped the hood and began inspecting the engine with the expertise that came from years of experience. The strange noise turned out to be a loose, belt-and-easy fix that took less than 30 minutes. As Gavin was wiping his hands on a rag, the car's owner walked into the garage, and he found himself momentarily stunned into silence. She was tall and elegant, with honey-blonde hair pulled back in a sophisticated knot and sharp blue eyes that surveyed the garage with keen intelligence. Her tailored gray suit probably cost more than his monthly rent, but it was her commanding presence rather than her obvious wealth that made Gavin straighten his posture. "Mr. Reed?" she inquired, her voice cultured but not cold. "Just Gavin," he corrected automatically, extending his hand before realizing it was still smudged with grease. "Sorry," he said, quickly withdrawing it. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Lillian Morgan," she introduced herself, surprising him by offering her own hand. "I understand you've diagnosed my car." Her handshake was firm, her skin soft against his calloused palm. "Yes, madam. Just a loose serpentine belt. I've tightened it and checked the tension. It should be fine now, but you might want to have it replaced in the next few months as a preventative measure." She nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you for your honesty. Many mechanics would have insisted on replacing it immediately and charged me for unnecessary work." Gavin shrugged. "No point in fixing what isn't broken yet." Lillian's eyes lingered on him with curious intensity before she asked, "How much do I owe you for today's work?" Joe had already prepared the bill, and Gavin handed it to her, explaining the minimal charge for labor. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing as she followed him to the office to settle the payment. As she was leaving, she turned back suddenly. "Do you always work on luxury cars, Gavin?" "I work on anything with an engine," he replied. "But honestly, I prefer the older models. They make more sense, less computer, more machine." This drew a genuine smile from her. "I admire that perspective. Thank you again for your help." Gavin watched as she drove away, the powerful engine of the Aston Martin purring smoothly. Something about Lillian Morgan had unsettled him, not just her beauty or wealth, but the sharp intelligence in her eyes and the way she had spoken to him with respect, not condescension. "Earth to Gavin," Joe called, snapping him out of his thoughts. "Got 3 more waiting. That fancy car's not going to pay our bills just by sitting in the lot." The rest of the day passed in a blur of oil changes and brake repairs. By the time Gavin cleaned up to pick up Mia from school, he'd almost forgotten about Lillian Morgan and her expensive car. Mia was waiting on the school steps, her purple backpack nearly as big as she was, chatting animatedly with another girl. When she spotted Gavin, she waved enthusiastically and ran to meet him. "Daddy, I got a gold star in math today." "That's my girl," he said proudly, lifting her up for a quick hug. "Ready for that mac and cheese I promised." At home, as Mia did her homework at the kitchen table and Gavin prepared their simple dinner, he found himself thinking again about the woman from the garage. There had been something intriguing about her, a complexity beneath the polished exterior. "Daddy, what's infinity plus infinity?" Mia asked suddenly, interrupting his thoughts. Gavin chuckled. "Still infinity, kiddo. It's a concept, not really a number." "That's what I thought," she said seriously, bending back over her worksheet. Later, after Mia was tucked into bed with her favorite stuffed rabbit and the daisies still fresh in their jar beside her, Gavin sorted through the mail. Bills, advertisements, and a notice about an upcoming parent-teacher conference that he'd have to request time off for. He sighed, calculating how much of his paycheck would be left after rent and utilities. Not enough for the new shoes Mia needed, or the field trip fee. Something would have to wait, but he hated disappointing her. The following morning at the garage, Gavin was elbow-deep in an old Chevrolet transmission when Joe appeared at his side. "She's back," Joe said simply. "Who's back?" Gavin asked, distracted by the stubborn bolt he was trying to loosen. "The Aston Martin lady says she wants to speak with you specifically." Gavin looked up in surprise, wiping his hands as he followed Joe to the front office. Lillian Morgan stood by the counter, today dressed in a casual but clearly expensive blouse and tailored jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Miss Morgan," Gavin greeted her. "Is the car giving you trouble again?" "No, the car is perfect," she assured him. "I actually came to offer you a job." This was so unexpected that Gavin could only blink at her. She continued smoothly. "I own several vintage automobiles that require specialized maintenance. My usual mechanic is retiring, and I need someone knowledgeable to care for them. Joe speaks highly of your skills, and I was impressed with your approach yesterday." Joe, standing nearby, looked as surprised as Gavin felt. I already have a job," Gavin said finally, gesturing around the garage. Lillian nodded. "Of course. I'm proposing a part-time arrangement, perhaps Saturdays. The compensation would be substantial, I assure you." The mention of substantial compensation caught Gavin's attention immediately. Extra money meant Mia's field trip, new shoes, maybe even starting a small savings account for her future. "What kind of vintage cars?" he asked cautiously. A pleased smile curved Lillian's lips. "I thought that might interest you. A 1967 Corvette Stingray, a 1965 Shelby Cobra, and a 1970 Dodge Challenger, among others." Gavin tried not to look too impressed, but these were dream cars for any mechanic. "I'd need to know more details: hours, expectations, compensation." "Naturally," she agreed. "Perhaps we could discuss it over dinner, tonight if you're available." Joe coughed behind him, and Gavin realized belatedly that her invitation sounded suspiciously like a date. I can't tonight." "I have my daughter," he explained. Lillian nodded, not looking put off. "Lunch tomorrow, then. There's a cafe on Oak Ridge Avenue, Bluebird Bistro." "Noon." Gavin considered his schedule. He could use his lunch break, and Joe owed him for covering that Sunday shift last month. "I can do that," he agreed finally. "Excellent." She handed him a business card with her contact information. "If anything changes, please let me know." After she left, Joe let out a low whistle. What the hell was that about? Gavin stared at the card in his hand, heavy, cream-colored stock with Lillian Morgan, CEO Morgan Innovations, embossed in elegant script. "I have no idea." "Morgan Innovations," Joe said thoughtfully. "That's the tech company that developed those medical imaging systems. They're worth billions." Gavin's eyebrows shot up. "Billions?" "Yeah, and from what I hear, she built it from scratch, started in her garage or something like that. Real rags to riches story." The idea of working for a billionaire was intimidating, but the potential income was too significant to dismiss without consideration. That evening, as Mia chatted about her day at school, Gavin pondered how to mention his lunch meeting. "I might have a chance to earn some extra money," he said as they washed dishes together, Mia standing on a step stool to reach the sink. "Working on some special cars on Saturdays." "What kind of special cars?" Mia asked, carefully drying a plate. "Really old, really cool ones," Gavin told her, making a vrooming sound that made her giggle. "But I'd have to work some Saturdays, which means we'd have less time together." Mia considered this seriously, her small brow furrowed. "But you'd be home for dinner and bedtime stories, right?" "Absolutely." "Then it's okay," she decided. "And we'd still have Sundays for the park, promise," he assured her, touched by her understanding. "Good, because I want to see the flower garden a lot." The next day, Gavin arrived at the Bluebird Bistro 10 minutes early, having changed into his cleanest jeans and a button-down shirt that his mother had ironed for him. The cafe was upscale but not intimidatingly so, with simple wooden tables and large windows that filled the space with natural light. Lillian was already there, seated at a corner table with a tablet in front of her. She looked up as he approached, closing whatever she was working on and standing to greet him. "Gavin, thank you for coming." Up close, he noticed details he'd missed before: the light freckles across her nose, the tiny scar near her right eyebrow, the warmth in her blue eyes that softened her otherwise serious expression. "Thanks for the invitation," he replied, taking the seat across from her. A server appeared immediately to take their orders. Gavin selected the simplest item on the menu, a turkey sandwich, while Lillian chose a salad. Once they were alone, she got straight to business. "Let me tell you what I'm proposing. I have a collection of 7 vintage automobiles that need regular maintenance and occasional restoration work. They're kept at my estate about 30 minutes outside the city. I'd need you for approximately 5 hours each Saturday, with flexibility for additional hours if a more significant repair is needed." "And the pay?" Gavin asked directly. $100 per hour, she stated. "Plus any parts required, of course." Gavin nearly choked on his water. $500 every Saturday would solve so many problems: Mia's school expenses, their precarious finances, maybe even allow him to quit the warehouse job. "That's generous," he managed finally. "It's market rate for a specialist with your expertise," Lillian replied matter-of-factly. "These vehicles require someone who understands their idiosyncrasies. Based on Joe's recommendation and my own observation, I believe you're qualified." Their food arrived, and as they ate, the conversation shifted unexpectedly. "Tell me about your daughter," Lillian said. "How old is she?" "Mia's 8, Gavin answered, surprised by her interest. "Just had her birthday this week, actually." "And her mother? Is she involved?" The question was direct but not unkind. "No," Gavin said simply. "She left when Mia was 3, decided family life wasn't what she wanted after all." Lillian's expression revealed nothing, but she nodded thoughtfully. So you're raising her alone. That can't be easy, especially with your work schedule. My mother helps, Gavin explained. And Mia's a good kid, smart, responsible. She makes it easier than it could be. She sounds wonderful, Lillian said, a genuine smile softening her features. What does she enjoy? The unexpected question led Gavin to talk about Mia's love of books, her fascination with the park's botanical garden, and her recent interest in astronomy. To his surprise, Lillian listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that suggested real interest rather than polite conversation. She sounds remarkably like I was at that age, Lillian commented. I was obsessed with knowing how things worked, always taking apart my toys to see the mechanics inside. Mia does that too, Gavin said, laughing. Last month she disassembled her digital clock. I had to help her put it back together. And did it work afterwards? Better than before, Gavin confirmed proudly. When lunch concluded, they had agreed that Gavin would start the following Saturday. Lillian provided him with the address of her estate and security information he would need to access the property. One more thing, she said as they prepared to leave. Would you be comfortable signing a non-disclosure agreement? My home is private and I prefer to keep it that way. Gavin nodded, understanding her concern. No problem. As they parted ways outside the cafe, Lillian offered her hand again. I look forward to working with you, Gavin. Her handshake was as firm as before, but this time he noticed a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there during their first meeting. That evening, Gavin told Mia about his new Saturday job while they prepared dinner together. The lady who owns the cars is very nice, he said, helping Mia measure rice for their stir-fry. Her name is Miss Morgan and she has cars from before even Grandma was born. Is she pretty? Mia asked innocently. The question caught Gavin off guard. Well, yes, I suppose she is. Is she pretty like Mommy was? Gavin's heart squeezed painfully. Mia rarely mentioned her mother anymore. No, not like Mommy, Miss Morgan is. He searched for the right words. She's more like a teacher, smart and proper. Mia seemed satisfied with this explanation and returned her attention to the vegetables she was carefully washing in the sink. Later that night, after Mia was asleep, Gavin researched Lillian Morgan online. The articles he found were impressive. She had indeed started Morgan Innovations in her garage, developing medical imaging technology that revolutionized early detection of certain cancers. Now, in her early 30s, she was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. Most of the photos showed her at business functions or charity events, always composed and professional. There was little information about her personal life, only mentions that she was unmarried and served on several philanthropic boards. The following Saturday, Gavin arrived at the address Lillian had provided, expecting something extravagant but still finding himself awed by the reality. The estate was a sprawling property with manicured grounds and a modern mansion of glass and stone set back from a private drive. A security guard at the gate checked his ID before directing him to a separate building behind the main house. The garage was a car enthusiast's dream, spacious, immaculately clean, with state-of-the-art equipment and 7 vintage automobiles arranged in a semicircle. Each was in pristine condition, gleaming under the overhead lights. Lillian emerged from a side door as he was admiring the Shelby Cobra. Today, she wore jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hair in a casual ponytail, a striking contrast to her business attire, but somehow equally elegant. "What do you think?" she asked, gesturing to the collection. "They're incredible," Gavin replied honestly. "Museum quality." "Not museum pieces," she corrected. "These are meant to be driven. That's why I need someone like you to keep them in perfect running condition. She showed him around the facility, explaining her maintenance schedule and the specific needs of each vehicle. The day passed quickly as Gavin familiarized himself with the cars and began basic checks on the Corvette Stingray, which Lillian mentioned was her favorite. When he finally emerged from under the hood, he found her watching him with an amused expression. "You look like a kid on Christmas morning," she observed. Gavin grinned sheepishly. "These cars are every mechanic's fantasy. I still can't believe I get paid to work on them." "Speaking of which," Lillian said, handing him an envelope. "Your day's wages as agreed." The envelope contained $500 in cash. Gavin stared at it, momentarily overwhelmed by what this would mean for Mia's field trip, the new shoes she needed, and the breathing room in their budget. "Thank you," he said simply. "You've earned it," Lillian replied. "Your reputation wasn't exaggerated. That Stingray hasn't sounded this good in years." As Gavin prepared to leave, Lillian walked him to his car. "Same time next Saturday." "Absolutely," he confirmed. "Good, and Gavin," she added as he opened his car door, "bring Mia sometime. There's a botanical garden on the grounds that I think she might enjoy." Surprised by the invitation, Gavin nodded. "She'd love that, thank you." Over the next few weeks, Saturdays at Lillian's estate became the highlight of Gavin's work life. The peaceful garage with its magnificent cars was a welcome change from the hectic pace at Parkside Auto and the physical strain of the warehouse. More surprising was how much he enjoyed Lillian's company. She often worked in a small office adjoining the garage while he tended to the cars, but they would break for lunch together, sharing sandwiches and conversation. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, Gavin found her easy to talk to, intelligent without being condescending, curious about his life and perspectives, and surprisingly down to earth for someone of her stature. He learned that she had grown up modestly, the daughter of a high school science teacher and a nurse. Her path to success had been paved with hard work and determination rather than privilege. This only increased his respect for her accomplishments. One Saturday in late October, after Gavin had been working for Lillian for about a month, she asked, "How would Mia feel about visiting tomorrow? The autumn colors in the garden are at their peak, and I thought she might enjoy seeing them." Gavin hesitated only briefly. "She'd be thrilled, but I don't want to impose on your weekend." "It's not an imposition," Lillian assured him. "I've been curious to meet this remarkable young lady you speak of so fondly. Besides, the garden is at its most beautiful right now. It should be shared." And so, the following day, Gavin found himself driving through the security gate with an excited Mia bouncing in the back seat. "Is this where a princess lives?" she asked, wide-eyed at the grand house. Gavin chuckled. "Not exactly. Miss Morgan is a businesswoman, not royalty." Lillian was waiting for them on the front steps, dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater. She smiled warmly as they approached. "You must be Mia," she said, kneeling slightly to be at eye level with the child. "I'm Lillian. Your dad has told me so much about you." Mia, usually outgoing, was momentarily shy, pressing against Gavin's side. "Do you really have a flower garden?" she asked finally. "I do," Lillian confirmed. "Would you like to see it?" Mia nodded enthusiastically, and soon they were walking along a stone path that wound behind the house and through a grove of maple trees ablaze with autumn colors. The botanical garden, when they reached it, was breathtaking, a carefully designed space with winding paths, stone benches, and an impressive variety of plants arranged in harmonious groupings. "This is the fall garden," Lillian explained as they entered. "I've designed it to have something blooming in every season." Mia's initial shyness evaporated as Lillian showed her the different plant varieties, explaining their names and characteristics with the patience of a natural teacher. Gavin hung back slightly, watching their interaction with growing warmth. Lillian had a gentle way with Mia, answering her endless questions seriously and encouraging her curiosity. They spent nearly 2 hours exploring the gardens, with Mia becoming increasingly animated as she discovered new plants and tiny wildlife butterflies, a garden snake, and even a family of rabbits nestled under a shrub. When they reached a central plaza with a small fountain, Lillian suggested they take a break. A table had been set with a picnic lunch, sandwiches, fruit, and homemade cookies that made Mia's eyes widen with delight. "Did you make these?" Mia asked, biting into a chocolate chip cookie. "I wish I could take credit," Lillian laughed. "But no, my housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, is the culinary genius. I'm hopeless in the kitchen." "Daddy's teaching me to cook," Mia informed her proudly. "I can make scrambled eggs all by myself now." "That's impressive," Lillian said sincerely. "I didn't learn to cook until I was in college, and even then, I wasn't very good at it." As they ate, Gavin observed the easy rapport developing between his daughter and Lillian. For someone who presumably had limited experience with children, Lillian seemed remarkably comfortable with Mia, treating her with respect rather than condescension. After lunch, Lillian led them to a greenhouse attached to the main garden. "This is where I keep the tropical plants that can't survive our winters," she explained, opening the glass door to reveal a humid paradise of exotic flowers and lush greenery. Mia gasped in delight. "It's like a jungle." "Exactly," Lillian agreed. "When I was about your age, I read a book about rainforests and became fascinated with tropical plants. This greenhouse is my little piece of the Amazon." As they walked among the orchids and ferns, Mia suddenly took Lillian's hand, pointing excitedly at a vibrant butterfly that had landed on a nearby flower. The gesture was small but significant. Mia, who was typically reserved with strangers, had accepted Lillian into her circle of trust. Later, as they prepared to leave, Mia asked hopefully, "Can we come back again sometime?" Lillian glanced at Gavin before answering. "I would like that very much if your dad agrees." "We shouldn't impose," Gavin began, but Lillian cut him off gently. "It's no imposition. This place is too large for just one person anyway. It's nice to share it with people who appreciate it." As they said their goodbyes, Lillian handed Mia a small potted plant. "This is a baby daisy plant," she explained. "Your dad mentioned they're your favorite. If you take care of it, it will bloom in the spring." Mia's face lit up as she carefully accepted the pot. "Thank you. I'll water it every day and put it in the sun, I promise." On the drive home, Mia chattered excitedly about the gardens, the greenhouse, and especially about Lillian. "Miss Morgan knows everything about plants, Daddy, and she let me touch the sticky plant that closes when you poke it." "Venus flytrap," Gavin supplied, smiling at her enthusiasm. "Yeah, that one. And she said next time she'll show me her library because I told her I like to read. And she said she has lots of books about space and plants and everything." "She's very nice," Gavin agreed, his mind lingering on the relaxed, genuine side of Lillian he'd seen today. Away from the business setting, surrounded by the garden she clearly loved, she had been less reserved, more animated. He'd caught glimpses of a playfulness beneath her composed exterior, especially in her interactions with Mia. That night, after tucking Mia into bed, Gavin found himself thinking about Lillian in a way that went beyond their professional relationship. There was something compelling about her, not just her beauty or success, but her kindness to Mia, her passion for her garden, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about things she loved. The following Saturday, when he arrived at the estate, Lillian greeted him with a warm smile. "Mia is wonderful," she said as they walked to the garage. She's exactly as you described, bright, curious, and kind. She hasn't stopped talking about the garden, Gavin told her, or about you. I think she's halfway to deciding you're her new best friend. Lillian looked pleased. I enjoyed her company too. It's refreshing to meet a child so genuinely interested in the world around her. As they reached the garage, she added, I meant what I said about her visiting again, perhaps next weekend. The annual meteor shower will be visible Saturday night, and I have a telescope that might interest her, given her love of astronomy. The invitation seemed to extend beyond a simple employer's kindness, and Gavin found himself wondering if there was more behind it. That's very generous, he said carefully, but I don't want to blur the lines of our working relationship. Lillian regarded him thoughtfully. Is that what you're concerned about? That I'm being friendly because you work for me, aren't you? He challenged gently. She smiled, not offended by his directness. No, Gavin, I'm being friendly because I enjoy your company and your daughters. The working relationship is separate. There was a sincerity in her expression that convinced him. Then we'd love to come for the meteor shower. The week passed slowly, with Mia growing increasingly excited about the upcoming stargazing. When Saturday came, Gavin worked his usual hours in the garage, but found himself more distracted than usual, thinking ahead to the evening. After he finished, Lillian suggested he go home to pick up Mia and return later. Bring pajamas for her, she advised. These meteor showers are best viewed after midnight and she might get tired. I have plenty of guest rooms if she needs to sleep before you drive home. When they returned that evening, Mia clutching her backpack with her pajamas and favorite stuffed rabbit, Lillian welcomed them warmly. She had prepared dinner, a simple pasta dish that she admitted was one of the few meals she could cook reliably, and they ate in a casual dining area with large windows overlooking the now darkened garden. After dinner, Lillian led them to a section of the grounds set up for stargazing. A large telescope stood on a raised platform, and comfortable lounge chairs had been arranged nearby with blankets for the cool night air. The shower should start around 11, Lillian explained, helping Mia look through the telescope at the moon. But there's plenty to see in the meantime. For the next hour, she guided them through a tour of the night sky, pointing out constellations and explaining the science behind the meteor shower in terms that Mia could understand. Gavin was impressed by her knowledge, and even more by her ability to make complex concepts accessible to an 8-year-old. As the night deepened, Mia's excitement about the meteors battled with her drooping eyelids. By the time the first shooting stars appeared, she was struggling to stay awake. Maybe we should get her to bed, Gavin suggested softly, seeing her valiantly fighting sleep. I'm not tired, Mia protested through a yawn. I want to see the shooting stars. Lillian had a gentle solution. How about we move to the sunroom? The ceiling is glass, so we can see the sky, but you can lie down on the sofa if you get sleepy. This compromise satisfied Mia, and they relocated to a beautiful room with walls of windows and a glass ceiling that offered a perfect view of the star-filled sky. Mia curled up on a comfortable sofa, wrapped in a blanket, while Gavin and Lillian sat nearby in armchairs. There, Mia pointed excitedly as a bright meteor streaked across the sky. Did you see it? Beautiful, Lillian confirmed. Make a wish. As more meteors appeared, Gavin found himself watching Lillian as much as the sky. In the dim light, with her face upturned to the stars and a look of wonder in her eyes, she seemed younger, less guarded. There was a vulnerability in her expression that he hadn't seen before, a glimpse beneath the composed exterior she typically presented. Mia's eyes eventually closed despite her best efforts, and she fell asleep on the sofa, her small face peaceful in the starlight. She's extraordinary, Lillian said softly, looking at the sleeping child. "You've done an amazing job raising her." "I've tried my best," Gavin replied. "Sometimes I worry it's not enough, that she deserves more than I can give her." Lillian turned to him, her expression serious. "From what I've seen, you give her exactly what she needs most: security, love, and respect. Those things matter far more than material advantages." Her words touched him deeply, addressing insecurities he rarely voiced. "Thank you for saying that." As they continued watching the meteor shower, their conversation flowed easily from astronomy to childhood memories to dreams for the future. Lillian spoke of her desire to expand her company's focus on medical technology for developing countries, while Gavin shared his hope to someday open his own classic car restoration shop. "You could do it, you know," Lillian said thoughtfully. "You have the skill and the passion. Those are the essential ingredients. And capital," Gavin added with a wry smile. "That's the missing piece." Lillian nodded, understanding. "True, but that's the part that can be solved with the right plan and investors." When the meteor shower began to wane, they decided it was too late to drive home. Gavin carried the sleeping Mia to a guest room Lillian had prepared, tucking her in carefully without waking her. "There's another room ready for you," Lillian told him, leading him down the hall. "Everything you might need should be there, but let me know if you're missing anything." The guest room was luxurious but comfortable, with a large bed and attached bathroom stocked with toiletries. As Lillian turned to leave, Gavin stopped her. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "Not just for the meteor shower, but for being so kind to Mia. It means a lot to both of us." Lillian smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "It's been my pleasure, truly. Good night, Gavin." "Good night, Lillian." It was the first time he'd used her first name, and the small intimacy hung in the air between them momentarily before she nodded and walked away. Lying in the comfortable bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, Gavin acknowledged what he'd been trying to ignore for weeks. He was developing feelings for Lillian Morgan. Feelings that were complicated by their employer-employee relationship, their different social positions, and the simple fact that she was likely out of his league in every conventional sense. Yet there had been moments tonight, the way she looked at him during their conversation under the stars, the genuine interest in her questions about his life and dreams, the natural way she had connected with Mia that made him wonder if perhaps she might feel something too. Morning brought sunlight streaming through large windows and the aroma of coffee drifting from downstairs. Gavin found Mia already awake and in the kitchen with Lillian, helping to mix pancake batter while chatting about the meteors she'd seen before falling asleep. "Daddy," Mia exclaimed when she spotted him. "Miss Morgan is teaching me to make blueberry pancakes. Real ones, not from a box." "I see that," Gavin said, smiling at the domestic scene before him. Lillian looked different in the morning light, her hair loosely tied back, wearing a simple sweater and jeans, a smudge of flour on her cheek. Less like a billionaire CEO and more like someone who could fit into their lives. "Coffee," Lillian offered, gesturing to a freshly brewed pot. "Please," Gavin accepted gratefully. Breakfast was a relaxed, happy affair, with Mia proudly serving the pancakes she had helped prepare. Afterward, despite Gavin's protests that they had imposed enough, Lillian insisted on showing Mia the library she had promised during their previous visit. The library was impressive: 2 stories of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves with a rolling ladder to reach the highest volumes. Comfortable reading nooks were tucked into corners, and large windows provided natural light. "This is better than the school library," Mia declared, spinning around to take in the vast collection. "Feel free to borrow anything that interests you," Lillian told her. "I've put some books I thought you might like on that table over there." Mia raced to the indicated table, where a stack of books about space, plants, and animals awaited her. Her delighted gasp made both adults smile. "You've thought of everything," Gavin said quietly to Lillian as they watched Mia examining her literary treasures. "I remember what it was like to be her age," Lillian replied. "Books were my window to worlds beyond my neighborhood. I want her to have that too." As they prepared to leave later that morning, Mia clutching her borrowed books and talking excitedly about the pancake recipe Lillian had written down for her, Gavin found himself reluctant to go. The weekend had felt like a glimpse into a different life, one with more ease, yes, but more importantly, one filled with shared interests and genuine connection. "Thank you again," he said to Lillian as Mia waited by the car, "for everything." "You're welcome anytime," she replied, her eyes holding his for a moment longer than necessary. "Both of you." The invitation seemed to contain an unspoken question, and Gavin found himself taking a chance. "Would you like to have dinner with us sometime? At our place," he clarified. "Nothing fancy, but Mia's been wanting to show off her cooking skills." Lillian's smile brightened. "I'd love that." They agreed on the following Friday evening, and as Gavin drove home with Mia chattering happily in the back seat, he felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. He had just invited a billionaire to their modest apartment for dinner, an apartment that suddenly seemed very small and shabby in his mind's eye. But throughout the week, as he prepared for Lillian's visit, cleaning thoroughly, planning a simple but nice meal within his budget, helping Mia practice the cookies she wanted to bake for dessert, he reminded himself that Lillian had shown no signs of judging their circumstances. She had been genuine and down to earth, valuing their company regardless of the setting. Friday evening arrived, and their apartment was as presentable as Gavin could make it. The shabby furniture was clean, fresh flowers, affordable daisies, Mia's choice, brightened the dining table, and the aroma of lasagna filled the small space. When the doorbell rang, Mia ran to answer it, excitement evident in her bouncing steps. Lillian stood in the doorway, dressed simply in a casual dress and cardigan, holding a small gift bag and a bouquet of flowers. "These are for the house," she said, handing the flowers to Gavin. "And this," she continued, giving the gift bag to Mia, "is for you." Inside was a child's gardening kit with small tools, gloves, and seed packets. Mia's eyes widened with delight. "Now you can plant more than just your daisy," Lillian explained. "These are all easy flowers to grow, even indoors." "Thank you." Mia hugged her impulsively, and Gavin saw genuine pleasure in Lillian's face as she returned the embrace. Dinner was simple but delicious, with conversation flowing easily among the three of them. Mia dominated much of the talk, eager to show Lillian her room, her books, and especially the daisy plant that had pride of place on her windowsill. After Mia had gone to bed, Gavin and Lillian sat in the living room with cups of coffee, the small space creating an intimacy that felt both comfortable and charged with unspoken possibilities. "Your home is lovely," Lillian said sincerely. "It feels like a real family lives here." "It's nothing like your place," Gavin replied, unable to keep a hint of self-consciousness from his voice. Lillian looked directly at him. "My house is beautiful, yes, but it lacks what you have here: warmth, life, love. It's just a place where I sleep and work." "You could change that," Gavin suggested. "Make it more personal." She smiled softly. "Perhaps, or perhaps what it's missing isn't decor but people." She paused, then continued more hesitantly, "Gavin, I need to be straightforward about something." He tensed slightly, uncertain what was coming. "These past weeks, getting to know you and Mia, it's been the highlight of my life lately. I find myself looking forward to Saturdays not because of the car maintenance, but because it means I'll see you." The The confession hung in the air between them, and Gavin felt a surge of both relief and nervousness. "I've been feeling the same way," he admitted, "but I wasn't sure if— If you're about to mention the difference in our financial situations, please don't," Lillian said firmly. "That's the least important thing about who we are." "It's not just that," Gavin explained. "You're my employer. I don't want you to think I'm interested in you because of your money or position." Lillian considered this thoughtfully. "That's fair. So what if we change that dynamic?" "I have a proposal. I'm listening." "I've been thinking about establishing a classic car restoration business as a side venture, something small and specialized, focusing on quality over quantity. I'd provide the capital and business connections, but I'd need a partner with the technical expertise and vision to make it successful." She paused, gauging his reaction. "Would something like that interest you?" Gavin stared at her, momentarily speechless. It was as if she had reached into his mind and pulled out his deepest professional dream. "You're serious?" "Completely," she confirmed. "It would be a true partnership, your skills and my resources, and it would put us on more equal footing, which I sense is important to you." "It is," he acknowledged. "I've always valued my independence." "As do I," Lillian said. "That's why I think we'd work well together professionally and perhaps personally too." The last words were spoken softly, almost hesitantly. Gavin moved closer to her on the sofa, his heart racing. "I'd like to find out." When their lips met, the kiss was gentle at first, then deepening with a natural intensity that surprised them both. When they finally pulled apart, Lillian's eyes were bright with emotion. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "It's getting late." Gavin nodded, walking her to the door. "Will I see you tomorrow? For the regular car maintenance," she smiled, touching his cheek gently. "Yes, and maybe we can discuss our potential business venture more then." "I'd like that." After she left, Gavin sat alone in the living room, his mind reeling from the evening's developments. The possibility of a business partnership that could transform his professional life, combined with the beginnings of a personal relationship with a woman he admired deeply, it was almost too much to process. But beneath the excitement was a thread of caution. He had Mia to consider. Any significant change in his life would affect her too. He couldn't rush into anything, no matter how promising it seemed. The following morning, he explained the business proposal to his mother while Mia was playing nearby. "It sounds wonderful, Gavin," Alina said after listening carefully. "But are you sure she's not just being charitable? I don't want to see you disappointed." "It's not charity," Gavin assured her. "She's a shrewd businesswoman. If she's proposing this, she believes it will be profitable." Alina studied her son's face. "And what about the personal side?" "I can see there's more than business between you two." Gavin couldn't hide his smile. "We're exploring that possibility, but I'm being careful, Mom. Mia comes first in any decision I make." "I know that, son," Alina patted his hand. "And from what you've told me about Lillian, she seems to understand that too." When Gavin arrived at the estate that afternoon, the atmosphere between him and Lillian had shifted subtly. There was an underlying awareness, a new dimension to their interaction that made even simple conversations feel more meaningful. As he worked on the Dodge Challenger, Lillian brought him detailed plans for the restoration business she had proposed. She had clearly put significant thought into it, outlining a business model that would start small but with potential for growth, focusing on high-end restorations for collectors. The initial investment would cover a workshop, equipment, and operating costs for the first year, she explained. After that, it should be self-sustaining based on these projections. Gavin reviewed the numbers carefully. They were optimistic but not unrealistic, and the business structure gave him significant autonomy while providing the security of Lillian's financial backing. "This could actually work," he said, looking up from the papers with growing excitement. "I know it could," Lillian agreed. "You have the talent and dedication. I'm just providing the runway for you to take off." They spent hours discussing the details, refining the plan based on Gavin's practical insights about the restoration market and process. By late afternoon, what had started as a proposal was evolving into a concrete plan with a timeline for implementation. "We could start small in a leased space," Gavin suggested. "Build a reputation before investing in a permanent facility." Lillian nodded. "That makes sense, and it gives you time to transition from your current jobs without taking too much risk." The word risk hung in the air, and Gavin knew they were both thinking beyond the business venture. Starting a relationship also involved risk, especially for Gavin, who had been burned before, and for Mia, who would inevitably be affected by any significant person entering their lives. "About last night," Gavin began carefully, "I want to be clear about something." Lillian set aside the business plans, giving him her full attention. "I'm not looking for a casual relationship," he continued. "I have Mia to consider. Anyone in my life is in her life too, and she's already been through one abandonment." "I understand," Lillian said softly, "and I respect that completely. I'm not interested in anything casual either, Gavin. That's not who I am." "So what are we doing here?" he asked directly. "Where do you see this going?" Lillian considered her words carefully before answering. "I see potential for something meaningful and lasting. I've never connected with anyone the way I connect with you, and with Mia as well. It feels right in a way that's new to me." Her honesty touched him deeply. "It feels right to me too, but we should take it slowly for Mia's sake." "Agreed," Lillian nodded. "We have time to let things develop naturally." As November turned to December, their relationship progressed steadily. The business plan moved forward, with Gavin securing a suitable space for the restoration workshop and beginning the process of acquiring equipment. Lillian handled the legal and financial aspects, setting up the company structure in a way that gave Gavin both equity and a generous salary. On the personal front, they spent increasing amounts of time together, often including Mia in their activities. They visited museums, attended a children's theater production, and spent weekends exploring Lillian's extensive gardens, which remained beautiful even in winter with evergreens and early blooming winter flowers. Mia blossomed under Lillian's attention, developing a special bond with her that was distinct from but complementary to her relationship with Gavin. Lillian never tried to replace Mia's absent mother, instead creating her own unique role in the child's life, part mentor, part friend, always respectful of the father-daughter bond that was at the core of Mia's world. As Christmas approached, Gavin faced the familiar challenge of creating a special holiday for Mia within his limited means. But this year was different. His financial situation had improved significantly with the regular Saturday work for Lillian and the salary advances she had provided as they set up the restoration business. For the first time, he could afford to buy Mia the telescope she had been dreaming of since their stargazing night, along with new winter clothes and books. He also purchased a thoughtful gift for Lillian, a rare first edition of a botanical guide he had found in a used bookstore, remembering how she had mentioned it was a childhood favorite. On Christmas Eve, Lillian invited Gavin and Mia to her home for dinner. The house was tastefully decorated for the holiday, with a magnificent tree in the main living room and subtle festive touches throughout. The meal was prepared by Mrs. Chen, who had come to know Mia's preferences and included all her favorites. After dinner, they gathered in the living room near the fireplace. Lillian had gifts for both of them for Mia, a beautiful wooden jewelry box with a built-in music box that played Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And inside, a delicate silver bracelet with a daisy charm. "For when you're older," Lillian explained as Mia admired the jewelry. "But you can use the music box now." For Gavin, there was a vintage leather jacket that he had admired once in passing, supple, well-crafted, and exactly his style. "How did you remember that?" he asked, touched by her thoughtfulness. "I pay attention to what matters to you," she replied simply. When Gavin presented his gift to her, Lillian's genuine surprise and delight at the rare book confirmed he had chosen well. "How did you find this?" she asked, carefully turning the fragile pages. "I've been looking for it for years." "I pay attention too," he said with a smile. Later, after Mia had fallen asleep in one of the guest rooms, Gavin and Lillian sat by the fire, talking quietly about the coming year and the future of both their business partnership and their personal relationship. "The workshop will be ready to open by February," Gavin said. "I've already had inquiries from 2 collectors who heard about the venture." "Your reputation in the classic car community is sterling," Lillian noted. "That's going to be our biggest asset starting out." "Our biggest asset is having you as the business mind behind the operation," Gavin corrected. "I know engines, but you know how to build something sustainable." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. Then Lillian spoke, her voice thoughtful. "Gavin, these past months have been the happiest of my life. Before I met you and Mia, I was successful by any objective measure, but something was missing. I didn't even realize how lonely I was until you both showed me what I was missing." Her vulnerability touched him deeply. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "You've changed our lives too. Not just financially, though I'm grateful for that, but by showing Mia possibilities I couldn't have shown her alone and by making me believe in second chances." "Is that what this is?" Lillian asked softly. "A second chance?" "For me, yes," Gavin confirmed. "After Mia's mother left, I didn't think I'd ever trust anyone enough to let them close to us again. I was focused on being everything Mia needed and convinced that was enough. And now I realize that by closing myself off, I was limiting Mia's world too. Seeing her with you, how she's blossomed, how excited she gets about the things you share with her, I know opening our lives to you was the right decision." Lillian leaned forward, her eyes bright with emotion. "I love you both, you know. I wasn't looking for a family, but somehow I found one anyway." The words hung in the air between them, significant and true. Gavin pulled her closer, kissing her with all the feeling he couldn't quite put into words yet. When they separated, he whispered, "Stay with us for Christmas morning. Mia would love to wake up and find you here." Lillian nodded, her smile radiant. "I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be." Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, with sunlight streaming through the windows of Lillian's home. Mia woke early, as children do on Christmas, and came running into the living room where Gavin and Lillian had fallen asleep on the sofa, her excited footsteps alerting them seconds before she burst into the room. "It's Christmas," she announced, as if they might have forgotten. Then, seeing them together, she grinned knowingly. "Were you guys having a sleepover?" Gavin exchanged an amused glance with Lillian. "Something like that, kiddo. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Mia," Lillian added, smoothing her tousled hair. "Should we see what Santa brought?" The morning was filled with joy as Mia opened her gifts, exclaiming over the telescope with particular delight. After breakfast, they bundled up to walk through the snow-covered garden, Mia running ahead to examine how the familiar plants looked in their winter state. "She's going to be a botanist like you," Gavin observed as they watched her carefully examining a frost-covered rose bush. "Or an astronomer," Lillian suggested. "Or anything else she sets her mind to. That's what's wonderful about Mia, she has such curiosity about everything. As they stood together in the winter garden, Gavin was struck by how natural it felt, this new configuration of their lives, this unexpected family they were forming. When he had walked into that convenience store months ago, counting change for a simple bouquet of daisies, he could never have imagined where that day would lead. By spring, Reed Classic Restorations was fully operational, with Gavin at the helm of the technical operations and Lillian handling the business side. Their first major projects, a 1957 Thunderbird and a 1965 Mustang, were underway, with more lined up based on Gavin's growing reputation in the collector community. Their personal relationship had deepened as well. Lillian spent most weekends at Gavin and Mia's apartment, which no longer felt small or shabby, but rather cozy and full of life. They had discussed the possibility of finding a place together, something that would combine the space and beauty of Lillian's estate with the warmth and accessibility of Gavin's neighborhood, but were taking that step slowly, mindful of Mia's need for stability. One warm Saturday in April, Gavin took Lillian and Mia to the public botanical garden where he had promised to take Mia on her birthday 6 months earlier, the promise he'd made when buying those daisies with his carefully counted change. The garden was in full bloom, with spring flowers creating a riot of color along the winding paths. Mia ran ahead, her knowledge of plants now considerable thanks to Lillian's influence, stopping to identify various specimens with impressive accuracy. "She remembers everything you teach her," Gavin said to Lillian as they walked hand in hand behind the excited child. "She's a natural learner," Lillian replied, "and she has your work ethic. She never gives up until she understands something." They found a quiet bench near a reflecting pool, watching as Mia crouched to examine a cluster of daffodils nearby. "I have something to ask you," Gavin said, his voice serious enough to make Lillian turn to him with raised eyebrows. "That sounds ominous," she teased. "Not ominous," he assured her. "Just important." He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "These past months have shown me what I want for our future. I want us to be a family officially, permanently." Lillian's eyes widened as she understood what he was saying. "I'm not proposing right this minute," he clarified with a small smile. "But I want you to know that's where my heart is heading. I love you, Lillian, and I believe we could build an amazing life together, the three of us." Emotion made Lillian's voice husky as she replied, "I want that too, Gavin. More than I've ever wanted anything." "I thought we could start looking for a house together," he suggested. "Something that would be ours from the beginning, not mine or yours, but a new place for our new life." "I'd love that," she agreed, squeezing his hand. "But what about Mia? How do you think she'll feel about making things more official?" As if on cue, Mia came running back to them, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers she had apparently been allowed to pick. "Look what the garden lady let me have. Aren't they pretty?" "Beautiful," Lillian confirmed. "Who are they for?" "For both of you," Mia declared, dividing the small bunch and presenting them with solemn ceremony. "Because you're my favorite people." Gavin exchanged a meaningful look with Lillian over Mia's head. "Sweetheart, how would you feel if Lillian spent even more time with us? Maybe if we all lived together in a new house." Mia considered this with the seriousness children sometimes bring to important questions. Would Lillian be there every day, even for breakfast? "Yes," Lillian confirmed, her voice gentle. "Every day, if that's okay with you." Mia's face lit up with a smile that answered more eloquently than words. "That would be the best thing ever. Could we have a garden like at Lillian's house? And a telescope spot? And maybe a dog?" Gavin laughed at the rapidly expanding wish list. "We'd have to discuss the dog, but I think a garden and a telescope spot are definitely possible." As they continued their walk through the botanical garden, making plans and dreams for their future together, Gavin reflected on how far they had come in such a relatively short time. From that moment of counting change for daisies, a small act of love for his daughter, to finding a partner who complimented him in every way, who loved Mia as her own, and who had helped him build not just a successful business but a fuller, richer life than he had ever imagined possible. 6 months later, on Mia's 9th birthday, Gavin and Lillian were married in a simple ceremony in the garden of their new home, a beautiful property with enough space for Mia to explore, a workshop for Gavin's restoration projects, and gardens that Lillian had begun designing the moment they purchased the land. The business continued to thrive, with Reed Classic Restorations becoming known for quality work that attracted collectors from across the country. Gavin had hired 2 apprentices and was teaching them the craft he loved, while Lillian balanced her time between the restoration business and Morgan Innovations, which she continued to lead with characteristic vision. Their family grew too, not with more children right away, though that was a possibility they had discussed for the future, but with a golden retriever puppy that Mia named Daisy, completing her long-held wish for a dog. On quiet evenings, when Mia was doing homework with Lillian's patient help, or when they gathered in the garden to stargaze with the telescope that now had a permanent mount in a specially designed observation area, Gavin would sometimes find himself overwhelmed with gratitude for how completely his life had transformed. From struggling single father counting change for a small bouquet of flowers to a man with a thriving business and a family filled with love, it was a journey he could never have predicted, but one he would forever be thankful for. And in their bedroom, in a simple frame on Lillian's nightstand, sat a pressed daisy from that original bouquet, a reminder of where their story began, and the simple truth that sometimes the most meaningful gifts aren't measured by their cost, but by the love behind them.